Welcome to Around the Weird. Here's your host, the museum curator of the strange and unusual, Mr. Nothing.
Thank you, mysterious voice, and welcome back to Around the Weird, a booktube channel where I talk about unusual and out-of-the-ordinary literature that I've found in my travels. Today, I want to talk about a graphic novel that I read recently, one from an acclaimed author, and one that is considered to be one of the top graphic novels, one of the best. It's about superheroes and psychic monsters destroying New York City. I am referring to Watchmen by Alan Moore and with art by Dave Gibbons, among other people. This is pretty acclaimed. I've heard a lot of people talk about it over the years. It was made into a movie in 2008, 2009-ish, which I enjoyed. I consider it one of Zack Snyder's best adaptations. He's not very good at his job, but sometimes he pulls it out, and one of them is one of those times is this book. I got it from my local library. Don't forget to patronize your local libraries. So as I said before, this is by Alan Moore. I've talked about Alan Moore on this channel. He's a British writer who's written a lot of comic books, From Hell, The Killing Joke, which I've talked about on this channel, Watchmen, and a whole bunch of other things. I really wanted to see if this lived up to the hype, because I've had a number of people recommend this to me, and I figured it was time to check it out, to see if it lived up to the hype that everyone had ascribed to it. So without further ado, let's talk about Watchmen. I'll do a little summary, a little analysis, and we will move on from there. So Watchmen was published in the 1980s, and it's the setting of the story too. It takes place in an alternate version of the United States, where superheroes started coming out and fighting crime in the 1930s. They hung up their hats in the 1950s, but a second generation called the Crime Busters arose in the 1960s and started fighting crime under the names Night Owl and Ozymandias and Silk Spectre and Rorschach. And so at this point in the story, the United States is using Dr. Manhattan as leverage during the Cold War to terrify the Russians. But this is only amplifying the nuclear arms race even more, because the Russians are worried that the United States will wipe them out at any time. Also, the Keene Act was passed in this story because the police and the regular citizens eventually grew tired of living under the thumb of superheroes, and so being a superhero is illegal unless you're Dr. Manhattan or the comedian and you're working with the government. There was an exception there, and that's about the reality where the story takes place. The events of the story are set in motion when the police find the body of Edward Blake. He was thrown out of a window, but the police don't know by who or for what reason. A superhero who's still going about doing superhero things despite the fact that it is illegal. His name is Rorschach. He ends up investigating and discovers that Edward Blake was the comedian, and he suspects that someone is going after masked heroes. He tries to tell this to the other retired heroes like Silk Spectre, Dr. Manhattan, and Night Owl, but they all agree that the comedian was a terrible person, and he probably made a lot of enemies. And that was why he died, and it wasn't because of any masked hero or masked killer or anything like that. They also don't want to work with Rorschach because he's a bit of a jerk, and so Rorschach has to go about investigating things on his own and beating up people to get answers. The story goes into a little bit about Dr. Manhattan as well as his relationship with Laurie, who is the Silk Spectre. Dr. Manhattan was created in a lab accident. He was the son of a watchmaker who became a physicist, and after the accident, he gained the ability to teleport others, and make people just bloop out of existence. he gained the ability to see atoms and look deep within everything, and so he has a lot of all powerful abilities. He's super strong, and at this point in the story, he's kind of growing distant from humanity. That happened like immediately after he was rematerialized in this Dr. Manhattan form. John Osterman is his name. And he broke up with his first girlfriend, and then he started going out with Lori. It seems like he's immortal, and also that he can see the past, present, and the future. Again, growing distant from humanity, and not really bothering to intervene when serious things occur. At one point in the story, he's out having a press conference talking about foreign policy and whatnot, and one of the reporters asks about people in his past and how they had cancer, and there's this insinuation that Dr. Manhattan gave them cancer, and he's a danger to society, and he gets so angry about this questioning that he just teleports everyone out into the parking lot, and then he goes to Mars to be alone because he's tired of being around people. In general, this might be the point where he's just done with humanity altogether. Later in the story, an assassin tries to kill Adrian Veidt, who also goes by his super name of Ozymandias. He's a businessman at this time. An assassin tries to kill him, and that results in him managing to fight off the assassin, trying to get information, but the assassin apparently swallows a cyanide capsule and dies before Veidt can get information. And so this confirms with Rorschach that someone is trying to push Dr. Manhattan out of the picture and then kill the heroes, but for what end it remains unclear. Rorschach continues to investigate some leads, but the police catch up with him and manage to put him in jail because he's doing superheroing, and also he's killed a lot of people in the process. Night Owl, whose real name is Dan Dryberg, and Lori, who is Silk Spectre, as I mentioned, they're back to doing superhero stuff, and they're also falling in love in the process, which is good for them. They beat up some people, and it excites them and gives them an adrenaline rush. And they decide that it's time to break Rorschach out of jail because it looks like he might be right about there being this grand conspiracy. They managed to successfully break him out of jail, and Dr. Manhattan shows up afterwards and takes Lori to Mars, where he explains to her that he's probably not coming back to Earth because he doesn't feel that humanity is special and he has no connection to them anymore. And she has a revelation at this time where she learns that the comedian raped her mother, but he was also her father. So it was a bit of a weird endeavor there. And she has a breakdown, and she comes to realize that her life was pretty unusual, and this realization helps Manhattan feel at least some sympathy towards humans, and so he decides to come back and prevent whatever disaster that's going to happen from happening. Rorschach and Night Owl find out that Adrian Veidt is behind everything, so they travel to his Antarctic base of operations, but it turns out that Veidt already launched his secret weapon, which is a psychic monster that's going to destroy half of New York. It does so, and then afterwards there are news reports that the Russians found out, and they decide that this is an existential threat, and so they decide there needs to be a peace in order for them to fight this common threat, which Veidt declares this a success on his part, that he's managed to obtain world peace or some semblance of it, even if it did cost millions of lives in the process. The other heroes agree to go along with it because if they were to reveal the truth, it would just upset this new peace. However, Rorschach does not agree to this, and he ends up heading back to the spaceship thing that they were on and trying to go back to New York. But Dr. Manhattan stops him and tries to convince him otherwise. But Rorschach argues that, there's no compromise here. This is the right thing to do. And he tells Manhattan that he's going to have to kill him. Otherwise, he's just going to go about his business. And Dr. Manhattan does that. He kills Rorschach. There's a newfound peace between the Russians and the United States. And the story kind of ends with Lori and Dan falling in love and getting together, adopting new identities as they are viewed as criminals after breaking out Rorschach and whatnot. So that's where the story ends there. In terms of analysis, there's a lot to parse with this story, and I'm not going to be able to cover everything because it's so chock full of interesting bits and a bunch of themes running throughout it. But some things that I found that are worth discussing is how this is a deep dive into the nature of superheroism, kind of like Kick-Ass, although Kick-Ass did not do nearly as well with these ideas and themes. There's a lot of questions of like, what does it mean to be a superhero, and like, why are people attracted to the idea of being a superhero? And a lot of the people in the story are attracted to the superstardom, or the perks of the job, or the fact that they're kind of broken, like the comedian, and they realize that society is broken, so this allows them to just go off and kill people and live in this rudderless, moralless kind of society. And like, none of the characters in the story really have pure intentions. Rorschach believes the world is immoral, and the only way to really solve the issue of rapists and murderers is to just kill them. Like, he's judge, jury, and executioner. Night Owl and Silk Spectre seem kind of drawn to the adrenaline rush nature. Dr. Manhattan is only doing the superheroism thing because, like, what else is he gonna do? He's an immortal godlike figure. He might as well try to stop crime or something like that in the process. So none of the characters really characters are really in it for the right reason. So I like that aspect of it. How human beings have flaws, and if they were to become heroes, they wouldn't do it just because it would be the right thing. They would do it because there's a number of other reasons in their life that they're drawn to fighting crime. There's also a question of morality in terms of, because Rorschach believes the world is immoral, especially after discovering a rapist pretty much burning a young girl alive and giving her bones to the dogs that he has. And so he takes it upon himself to decide what is right and what is wrong, and that's really what superheroes are. Like, there would be the only morality with superheroism is what the superheroes decide is moral. So if you want to kill someone, that's fine. Who's going to stop you? Also, there's the fact that the comedian and Dr. Manhattan were associated with the U.S. government, and so whatever was moral or whatever was right or whatever justice was just what the United States decided at the time. And it ended up scaring the Russians because they have these superhumans or superheroes who were willing to fight on behalf of the U.S. government and preserve their justice, their way of seeing things. And that's terrifying. There's a comic called Superman Red Sun, which is just like, what if Superman were Russian? He'd be preserving the Russian way of life. It's a lot to think about, and I can see how this comic is very influential because it's a deep dive and it gets you thinking a lot about how superheroes would be, or why people are drawn to being superheroes. I see a lot of influences and not Kick-Ass, but also Batman Year One, The Long Halloween, even the Sandman series, because Dream is very much like Dr. Manhattan. And so I really like how influential this comic seems to be and how it presented these grand ideas. Another thing worth talking about with this story is Dr. Manhattan himself. Dr. Manhattan is a godlike hero, the son of a watchmaker, eventually becoming a physicist and then becoming a victim of his own experiment before gaining godlike powers. Dr. Manhattan is a Superman type figure. He can do anything that he wants. He can fight off any criminal that he wants. He helped. I would argue that he single-handedly won the war for Vietnam. Won the Vietnam War for America in this story. It doesn't seem like anything can stop him short of Ozymandias in terms of his weaponry. But even the weaponry that Ozymandias uses doesn't really stop Dr. Manhattan. He just comes back. So it seems like he truly truly is God. Dr. Manhattan has nothing to stop him. Unfortunately, he's become distant from humanity in the process. Because he's so powerful, he no longer has that connection to John Osterman anymore. Like, there's several points in the story where he says that John Osterman is dead. Like, there's a separate identity between Dr. Manhattan and John Osterman. And so what's left is just a godlike being who can't possibly connect with humans. And that creates a number of problems, because he doesn't ever want to stop the bad things that happen with humanity, because it's not his problem anymore. There's an interesting quote that I would like to read to you. Blake, she was pregnant. You gunned her down. Yeah, that's right. Pregnant woman, gunned her down, banging. You know what? You watched me. You could have changed the gun into steam, or the bullets into mercury, or the bottle into snowflakes. You could have teleported either of us to goddamn Australia, but you didn't lift a finger. You didn't really give a damn about human beings. I've watched you. You never cared about Jenny Slater even before you ditched her. Soon you won't be interested in Sally Jupiter's little gal either. And that's the comedian calling out Dr. Manhattan for not stopping him from killing his girlfriend at the time. And like it's not Dr. Manhattan's fault that the comedian shot his girlfriend. Like, the comedian is a bad person, objectively. But Dr. Manhattan could have done all of that. Like, he can see the past, present, and the future. He knew that the comedian was going to shoot her. He could have done anything that the comedian listed, and yet he did nothing. He chose to let it happen. Later in the story, he indicates that he has no control over fate or anything like that. He's a puppet. He can only see the machinations. But I disagree with that. He's an all-powerful being who can loop people out of existence. He can change whatever he chooses to. And I would argue that he just doesn't, because of that lack of connection to humanity. It's not his problem anymore. He's so powerful, he's so godlike, that there's just nothing connecting him, and no reason for him to ever stop anything bad from happening to human beings. And I see the connections to Superman here. Superman was an all-powerful being as well, is an all-powerful being who was an alien from Krypton, but raised by Smallville parents. And I think Alan Moore might be arguing that, you can say Superman is the protector of humanity, but there's no way he could ever sympathize or even understand humans, because he's just so powerful. He can turn back time. That's godlike right there. Like, much like Dr. Manhattan, who used to be human and has no connection to that human side anymore. Like, Superman would be more of a threat to humanity than anything else. And I really like how Alan Moore allows us to draw those comparisons, especially given that he doesn't directly mention Superman, except for once where a newscaster says there is a Superman and he is American. Which, again, the nationalistic nature of superheroes right there. Definitely a lot to think about. Another interesting thing about this story is how I think there's a lot of commentary on the Cold War in this story. Particularly the fact that it takes place in the 1980s, and there's this worry that Russia and the United States are going to launch nukes at each other. And that's exactly what was happening in Alan Moore's time. They were nearing the Cold War and at this point when the story was written, but it was still brewing. Like, there was still that fear that Russia or the United States might launch a nuke and destroy everything, and everything would just be horrible and humanity would be destroyed. And so what I think Alan Moore is kind of arguing here is that we could posture all we want, and the United States and Russia can pretend that we're enemies, but at the end of the day, there are a lot of existential threats. The existential threat is destruction by alien beings in this story. But and while that's not the case for us in reality, there are still a number of threats. Being destroyed by an asteroid, climate change, a number of disasters, all things that we need to take care of in order for humanity to blossom and flourish. So I really like that. Like, he's using the superheroes as a way to say, hey, this Cold War thing, it's not a good idea. And it's going to lead to our destruction unless we make several changes. Something I don't like about the story is how it kind of drones on at times. It's very dialogue heavy, and a lot of the times the dialogue feels like it's going nowhere, and it seems kind of pretentious and also really corny and sometimes bad. It's just so much dialogue and so many subplots within this story too, which I don't think is necessary. I think Alan Moore could have gotten rid of a couple subplots and you'd still have a pretty solid story. It doesn't drag it down too much, but the dialogue, I feel like it kind of borders on parody. There's a quote from Rorschach that I would like to read to you. "Soon it will be dark. Beneath me, this awful city, it screams like an abattoir full of retarded children. New York." That's something that Alan Moore actually wrote. And someone told me that Rorschach was sort of satirious. Like he's supposed to be a parody or something like that. And I can definitely see that. But also, Alan Moore gives Rorschach a background in his story where it seems like he's trying to argue that Rorschach is like this superhero for an immoral world, and he's kind of necessary. But it also seems like at the end of the story, he's saying that Rorschach is the only moral voice in when everyone else wants to hide the fact that Ozymandias killed a whole bunch of people to unite the world. The dialogue it feels very edgelord like times, and I don't know whether or not I'm getting mixed messages is what I'm saying. Like it feels like satire at times, but it also feels pretty sincere, and I don't know what exactly Alan Moore was going for at those times. Maybe being a bit more clear, but I'm sure people would argue that I'm just being dumb and I can't understand subtext or something like that. But hey, that's Alan Moore's fault for making the subtext too subtexty, in my opinion. That doesn't sink the story completely, but it does make it hard to take a Rorschach series as a character. Anyway, so those are my thoughts on Watchmen, a pretty solid graphic novel by Alan Moore. I'm going to say I do recommend it. I think there were a lot of comics that came afterwards that did this a little better, but I can definitely see how much it influenced the comic book world. This seems like an important point, a crucial apex point or something like that in the world of comics, where everything that came after was kind of influenced in some way by this. Definitely worth checking out. I'm glad I read it. I'm going to look for more by Alan Moore again, just because he's a pretty solid writer. If you read this before and you want to comment on something I've said or something like that, feel free to comment below. Let's have a discussion about Watchmen and the nature of superheroes. Otherwise, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe so that other people can find, my thoughts on the Watchmen. And until then, I wish you the best of luck in your weird and Rorschach-y travels. Farewell.